in brightest day, in blackest night. All other podcasts tremble in fright. Losers cower before the power. Oranges lust and blues you can trust. Indigos feel and white ones heal. Yellow scare and green ones dare. That sapphire love and black hands glove will rock your foundation without hesitation. Chad and Marge face evil's might. Respect their power, for they'll make you see the light.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Marble.
I'm Chad Bokelman.
For some reason, I thought you were going to say Dan Kurtzky. I don't know why. Maybe last week is still in my head. And this is the LanternCast.
Episode 519.
No woo.
This is your baby, man. I'm not going to taint your baby with a woo.
This is a no woo song. I don't know if it's entirely it's our baby, but it's something we've been kicking around for. It's been gestating for a while.
To be clear, big guys listening at home, we are not kicking babies.
No, that might be the lost episode, but it's not tonight's episode. A new sport has been invented. No. So this will be the inaugural episode of the inaugural GLJune, which hopefully won't be a one-year wonder, but let's try to make this brief and also try to make this diplomatic. Chad and I have been thinking about this for a couple of years now, that as a byproduct of JLMA and as a byproduct of when we were running JLMA and it was our baby when it was Blackest Night. While everybody who ended up doing the show, they came through fine and the recordings were fine. Everybody brought their A game. I think we both, before we got to that stage, I guess it's objectively, I think we could say we both were a little emotionally unsatisfied about the initial start of the process. So we said, well, you know what? Then maybe it would be a good idea and it's actually become more apropos now because there's more podcasts that can join in and do this, that maybe instead of waiting in a cyclical period until there's another Green Lantern centric event in JLMA, then maybe we should just do our own crossover event amongst our Green Lantern podcast to cover a particular Green Lantern story, whether it's every year or every other year. Ideally, I guess it would be every year. There's enough events to either revisit or do that have never been done. So that's the backstory. So something we have also talked about doing for a long time that we never did seemed perfect for this. So we're going to do the 2000 Green Lantern Circle of Fire event, which is an event with a small E, because it all pretty much took place like it was all in October, wasn't it? Did all the one shots come out in October?
I think that's when they're cover dated, which would mean they came out in August.
So that's what we're going to be doing tonight, and we're going to be handling the first of the two main Circle of Fire one shots, the Green Lantern Circle of Fire number 1, and we're going to be doing the Green Lantern and Firestorm individual one shot, because that's pretty much what these events were. They were Circle of Fire 1 and 2, and then a lot of one shots sandwiched in between, and an Impulse epilogue, which we kind of forgot was not actually a one shot when we were looking at this, and luckily Dan will be taking that one too.
For sure. So, yes, Mark mentioned JLMA. So for those of you who maybe didn't listen to the most recent episode we did about a Green Lantern comic, which was 517, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay. Episode 517. JLMA is a podcasting crossover event. Its basic intent is by covering something loosely connected to the Justice League as a whole, or the members that make up the Justice League. That gives comic podcasters the opportunity to jump in with the character of his or her choice, and therefore make it relevant to their coverage, and we can all cross over and share listeners for a month and sort of kind of a lot of these shows, not all of them, but a lot of them, like us, actually have been on the air for quite a long time. And podcasting is becoming big to the point where everybody has one, including every celebrity. So, like, how do you get new listeners, or people know that you're out there? Well, one of the cool ways is we can all share airspace. So that's what we're doing with JLMay. But with GLJune, we can do basically the same thing, but on a much smaller level, and include the different Green Lantern specific podcasters. So while Mark already mentioned, we're going to be starting tonight with Circle of Fire #1, and then one of the one shots. Then you're going to follow from here to listen to either Myron and Phil over at the Podcast of Oa, or Adam and Donnie, who is better known as the Emerald Enthusiast. And they, over on YouTube, they have the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. And specifically, their Green Lantern related shows are referred to as Emerald Echo. Because Podcast of Oa and Emerald Echo are going to be covering some more of the one shots. And then at the end of this month, Dan will be releasing over on his Mosaic Comics YouTube channel a review of the second/end of this story, Circle of Fire #2. And then he'll also be talking about the Impulse epilogue that I just read for the first time today. Is not necessarily an epilogue, but I'm sure Dan will make it work. But you have the opportunity to listen to 4 different Lantern podcasts this month, and we can all share airspace and listeners. So I think it'll be cool.
Well, we're certainly hoping. It's 516, by the way. 517 was Green Lantern #1. 516.
Oh, okay.
After I rubber stamped what you said, and I started thinking, let me double check, because in my mind, which I should have caught right away, because Dan, I knew Dan was in 2 straight recordings. But yeah, so 516 was the JLMay. So which was still fun. It was weird covering half a story, but it was still fun.
Which is going to be repeated tonight. We're technically covering half a story.
Probably, well, technically not even half. Well, I guess true. Half if you just look at the two bookend, one shots. I mean, or the two, not one shots, but the 2-parter, #1 and #2 of just the Circle of Fire. You are correct, but as the overall story, yeah, but somehow this, based on where this leaves off on some levels, I don't know. It seems a little less. It should seem more anticlimactic, but I think after maybe I'm just numb after what we did for JLMay.
You know what I think? I think we should treat this like we would do a movie review. Sometimes we talk non-spoiler stuff first, and then we very clearly let the listeners know, okay, now we're getting into spoilers. And if they hadn't seen it, to then stop listening to the episode. We could do the same here. We could talk about only the stuff we're going to be talking about. And then once we talk about our specific 2 issues, anything we want to say about the actual event itself beyond that, we can label to the listeners. Okay, guys, if you want to follow the coverage, stop the podcast here, go over to Podcast of Oa or Donnie and Adam over at Emerald Echo, and follow that to the end of the month over at Mosaic Comics. All right, now we'll talk about the rest of the event and our thoughts on how this story plays out. Unless we want to save that to a future episode.
Yes, as you were saying it, let's save it until maybe more of these actually come out. So then it's easier. It doesn't have to be its own episode, but it might be a segment. We can do an epilogue and just talk about So then going back to your logo idea, then it might make more sense, because maybe we can actually use that twice, even if it's not exclusively all Circle of Fire when we do the second one. Plus, it justifies making a new category, and we get 2 entries in our GLJune category to be made. So hey, that works too.
Oh yeah, and not to mention if it's not going to be the majority of whatever the next episode is, we have many shorts we can still cover to fill that second half.
Yeah, but luckily for us, doesn't Green Lantern come out next week?
I don't know. I'll look it up later.
Yeah, we'll double check. I would be willing to bet you, based on where we are, it's got to be close. So then that might very well be where we can segue anyway. So
all right,
you ready?
Where are we going?
All right, so I'm going to try to be succinct. The good thing about issue #1 of Circle of Fire is, even though understanding what all of this stuff means, it clearly doesn't it's not going to happen until you get all the pieces put together. But as far as just understanding as in on the basic level of what's going on in this book and what's at stake, and it's relatively straightforward. This isn't a Morrison issue. No, thank God. Which was because I hadn't read this in so long, so I'm glad when I went back. I had a slight fear that it's like, wow, am I going to be able to, is this going to flow really well, or am I going to literally have to read every single issue in the event to even understand what's going on in this issue? But let's do the creative team right off the bat, just because I can get into the meat soon. So while the cover title is Dark Conception, the actual issue title inside is Darkness Visible. I kind of like Dark Conception better. Written by Brian K. Vaughan, penciled by at least for Jim and I, our old friend Norm Brayfogle, since a lot of the Spectre. Inked by John Lau, Ray Cressing, Steve Bird, a lot of inkers, John Nyberg and Keith Aiken. Lettered by Sean Honett, colored by Glenn Whitmore, separated by Jameson, assistant editor Frank Berrios, and editor is Matt Idelson. Not your usual GL creative crew on this book, we'd have to say. And certainly the cover art certainly suffers in this one.
Yeah, for sure, a little bit.
Yeah, compared to issue 2, which gets a nice Daryl cover. So we begin on Ran, where our old friend Adam Strange here is dealing with a panicky population that is being threatened by this shadowy figure calling himself Oblivion. Has some cool little like goat horns on the side of his head, and he kind of does a Hulk and Infinity War kind of thing. It's like basically go. Not literally, because there's some differences, but you'll understand that he basically Adam Strange gets sent to Earth to warn Earth what's coming next, and it's Oblivion. Even except in this case, Oblivion literally sends him there himself to do the warning. We have a cool little moment where Kyle's like working really literally kind of like mining at midnight oil here, trying to finish his comic strip, which is kind of cool because he's actually drawing superhero comics. And of course, he's being assisted by none other than John Stewart. And again, this is circa 2000, so we have to understand that John Stewart is still crippled. He's still in his wheelchair. When there'll be an appearance by another character, which we'll reference soon, that again, it's early in this character's development or use. So things that change along the way haven't really happened yet. So for John Stewart, he's still crippled in his wheelchair. He's drawing like backgrounds and drawing buildings so Kyle can try to meet his deadline. This apparently is the first time John ever sees a picture of Alex because he doesn't know who she is. And he mentions it, and Kyle kind of talks about it briefly, but he doesn't really want to go into it. They kind of even give us a little mini fridging picture. And, John, they continue to do that. And Kyle talks about, at the end of the day, we all have to just do our best to move on. We go over to Ivy University, and we see Ronnie Raymond, who is being tutored by Ray Palmer. And of course, at this point, Ronnie Raymond is still Firestorm, but he and Professor Stein have been separated, which Chad will talk about more in a few minutes. And you see, obviously, Ronnie Raymond has a hard time understanding science concepts when Stein is now whispering in his ear. There's somebody on campus that shows up with a gun, and they get alerted to it. So Ronnie goes into Firestorm form to deal with him. This is Adam Strange being sent to Earth, and Firestorm is literally, not surprisingly, hot-headed, and he doesn't let Adam Strange to explain everything. It gives him much of a chance. Firestorm tries to use his understanding of how sodium and water mixes, but it doesn't really work so well for him. Luckily, Ray Palmer shows up about what's going on. It's like, hey, not only did you botch the lesson I tried to teach you about how sodium and water mix can explode, but be very unreliable. How you don't know how it's going to work out, just that it's going to explode. That he also kind of reprimands him for, hey, this is also one of the Justice League's oldest friends in Adam Strange. And at this point, Adam Strange kind of is giving them a little bit of a primer. What's going on? We cut back to Kyle and John. They're all happy because, hey, we finally did it. It's like, kind of like nothing can stop us now. One of those moments which they kind of even refer to. Well, that's really not a good thing to say, anything like that. And of course, Kyle gets an alert for the Justice League. He flies off to the Watchtower. Justice League is all there, and Adam Strange is kind of giving them gives them all more elaborate detail about what's going on, and he talks about how the threat's named Oblivion, and Kyle reacts immediately. And he goes, that doesn't make any sense. And we find out that the reality is Kyle, as a kid, when he was drawing his own comic books, created this character called Oblivion, who looked the same exact way, tall, shadowy, kind of like with the horns. He reminds me of Onslaught a little, not entirely, but I think there's some similarity in my mind. Maybe it's the circa that this was coming out in, that it always kind of gave me the Onslaught kind of vibe. And, Kyle, things that Adam Strange talks about related to about the powers of Oblivion, they register more with Kyle. It's like, this is really weird. Kyle even picks up on the fact that, hey, did the people on Rand act normal when he was there, or did they seem out of sorts? And he goes, actually, they were out of sorts. They were panicky, which is unlike them. And he goes, well, that was another thing that basically my character would instill in people. The Justice League decides to go confront Oblivion, except for Batman. Like when Kyle goes, hey, Batman, do you want to come with me? And Batman just kind of gives him the cold shoulder and walks away. Kyle kind of gets offended by this. And Firestorm is also sent, basically, he's put on the sidelines because, again, he's too hot-headed and they don't trust him. Justice League goes out to confront confront Oblivion. Oblivion gives kind of like this, Kyle just recognizes him immediately and goes, hey, that's like my creation. And Oblivion responds, it's like, he belongs to no one. I existed long before the birth of this meaningless universe, and I shall continue to thrive long after it has been destroyed. Wonder Woman tries to talk to him and tries to, take the proper civil approach. He gets punched in the face. The Justice League leaps into action. Superman goes, Kyle kind of calls us before it happens. Is like, hey, we can't really just take this guy with brute force because he can create cosmic events. So he creates a black hole around him. When Superman goes to fight Oblivion, he creates a red sun. So he starts becoming weak. That, Kyle keeps insisting that, I understand what's going on here. Trust me. Superman sends Kyle back to Earth. Kyle thinks it's because he doesn't trust him, but it's like, no, basically we need you to rally another line of defense in case we fail. Kyle goes back to Earth. On his way to Earth, Kyle is intercepted by the Spectre, Hal Jordan's version of the Spectre. And this is what I was alluding to. Kyle, at this stage, this is when nobody really can recognize that Hal is the Spectre or can remember that Hal is the Spectre. Now, yes, theoretically, he could have showed him that he was Hal at the moment and it would have worked, but it would have dissipated. And he kind of warns Kyle about that you're going to be betrayed by someone close to you. The key to figuring this out is all basically inside yourself. He's doing the very Obi-Wan stuff that the Hal Jordan Spectre did in his mentor role to Kyle during the stage. Kyle eventually gets sick of all this because Hal just can't tell him anything specifically. So he says, well, I really don't have time for this. I have more important things to do. He gets back to the Watchtower. Just as he gets back to the Watchtower, the communications with the Justice League task force that was facing Oblivion, just that communications gets cut off. Kyle reaches out to Batman. He can't get in touch with him, but he does get in touch with Oracle. Oracle, Batman is busy. He's not like this removed from the playing field. He and Robin are doing their stuff, but Oracle's basically been put in charge of getting Kyle help. He gets Power Girl. She gets Power Girl to eventually show up to help Kyle. At this point, Kyle is putting together a team, which is going to include Firestorm, because even though Adam just keeps reprimanding him about being too green, Kyle pulls rank because of the fact that technically he's an active member and the Adam is more like an advisor, a consultant at this point. So he doesn't really have the say. Kyle wishes he had more help or there was more backup, more support. Just at that moment, all of a sudden, like another portal opens up. Kyle thinks it's going to be Oblivion. It's not. These portals open up and all different Green Lanterns that nobody has ever seen before shows up. We have one that's from the past. It looks like a knight. We find out that he's a Daxamite too. We have two twins that are from the Teen Lantern Corps that are also way in the future. They come from the way future. They're descendants of Kyle as well, because they're sharing Kyle's one last Green Lantern ring. Basically, all his remaining teen descendants basically share the same Green Lantern ring. There's a Green Lightning, which is another descendant of Kyle because it's which makes Kyle real happy, or borderline sarcastic, that a relative of his and a relative of Wally eventually get together because there's Green Lightning is a West and a Rainer. So she's a Green Lantern and a Flash. We have a robot Green Lantern, which is an old Manhunter, like the prototype Manhunter that was reprogrammed by the Guardians. And we have a mysterious Green Lantern who seems perfectly human and doesn't have as much of a great story as everybody else. She was literally plucked from her timeline right then, because almost all these characters are either from the past or the future. And we find out that this Green Lantern is actually Alex DeWitt from her universe, where Kyle died, but Alex became Green Lantern. They all decide to there's a weapon. There's a weapon. I got to get the name of this thing. The Omega Option, which when Kyle was a kid, that was the mysterious device that could stop Oblivion. So they get split into different teams. Firestorm and the robot GL go after the Omega Option, and they all get split into different teams. Part of why Kyle does this is he does remember what Hal said as the Spectre, that you're going to be betrayed by someone close to you, and they go off on these separate missions, and that pretty much ends the first part of Circle of Fire.
I'm actually pretty sure I've never read this before. I might have read issues 1 and 2, but not made the effort to circle back. I think that's might have been what happened. I think I maybe found 1 and 2 early on in discount diving bins back when, before being a host or even, semi-regular co-host of the LanternCast. Back in my early days of collecting and just trying to find anything and everything Green Lantern I could add to my logging boxes. I think I had 1 and 2 and I read them, but it was harder to find the individual one-shots. And I was like, I'll circle back and read them once I have them. And now I have them, but I never ended up circling back to reading the entire thing. So because some of these look familiar, and then I, obviously in preparation for this episode, this event, I read the entire thing again. So I think this is my first time reading the entirety of Circle of Fire.
I'm sure I read it. I just, like I said, I haven't touched it, or I hadn't touched any of these issues since, which is ironic because Chad and I wasn't much of a reason. It wasn't the defining moment or reason why we didn't do this earlier, but all of my Circle of Fire issues are all bagged together except for the friggin' second part. I don't know why it was separated, but it's literally the one that I just summed up, all the one-shots, including the Impulse, quote-unquote, epilogue, but number 2 must be bagged either with something else or by itself. So that was one of the things so I need to go back and I want to go back and reread all the one-shots again, and I want to go back and read the conclusion. I mean, obviously I remember the key parts of the conclusion.
Right. But yeah, this is most definitely the first time I've read this. I know Oblivion has shown up again, but have they all been like when we see, like when like comics do the whole kind of best of thing where they're like, hey, and here's a quick splash page of all of your villains returning to haunt you type moments. Have we seen Oblivion again? It was just only in those moments, because I know I've seen Oblivion before, but it's like, wait, if this is his origin and his demise, well, we saw him in New Guardians.
Different Oblivion,
but New Guardians.
I believe that is the only other appearance. And I don't mean that maybe he couldn't have shown up in a panel, like you said, if there was something in Kyle's mind or whatever. I don't believe as a villain, doing the analogy again, I don't think it's like Onslaught, where we know Onslaught has shown up in different comics, even if they were different versions of Onslaught, or it wasn't quite 100% the same thing.
Right.
I don't think we've seen Oblivion, certainly because we know what happens because the Oblivion power is part of what ends up helping, crazy origin as it is what helps make Kyle Ion the first time.
Yes. Which is something I wanted to get to, but not just yet. So we'll circle back around to that point.
Okay.
Sure. I just kind of want to start off, starting page to page, obviously not recapping each page, but just kind of going through this chronologically. I always like the inclusion of Adam Strange. I think GL and Adam Strange should team up more often, and not even necessarily specifically freaking one of our more familiar lanterns. I think we should be seeing Green Lantern and Adam Strange team ups for multiple different lanterns anytime we get the chance, because much like, have we seen, maybe there are actually more examples of Adam Strange and Green Lantern than this example I'm thinking of. Like, we've been seeing occasions for like Space Cabbie to show up in Green Lantern type storytelling, because Space Cabbie is just kind of out there. Adam Strange, I know it's the ping pong back and forth between Ran and Earth, but his Zeta Ray malfunctions happen so often. It's just like, or Zeta Beam malfunctions happen so often. You would think you'd see him more often. And he and Hal were created in this sci-fi era of the Silver Age that just really made sense. And let's be honest, their original costumes, the original Adam Strange costume, which is, let's face it, Adam Strange of the DC heroes has probably the most unchanged costume of any of them from his origins to today. But there's a similar design element between Hal's original costume and Adam Strange, not in terms of the familiarity, but they both look of the early 60s sci-fi, and their storytelling matches a lot of that too, because not a lot of mainstream people knew a whole lot about science fiction and stuff like that and the facts and physics of it all. So they had a lot of the same storytelling tropes. So I really feel like they fit together. So it's really cool to see Adam Strange here.
And it fits. I mean, I don't have a huge attachment to Adam Strange. I mean, I do like when he shows up, and it seems to be relevant when he shows up, which maybe in a way is good that he's not so prevalent all the time, because that might kind of like lessen the impact of when he does show up. But I do like how they kind of use use Rand and they use Adam Strange to kind of do as he becomes the unofficial herald of Oblivion to tell people, hey, I'm coming. I did like that. That's one thing I completely forgot about this story, probably because it was only the first couple of pages. But I honestly, when I was rereading the story, I did forget that Kyle right off the bat was putting the 2 and 2 together about Oblivion, because eventually when we talk about the end of this, we'll dive deeper into why that's super relevant. But I didn't quite remember that right off the bat. It was Kyle was 100% like, hey, I created this guy.
Yeah.
So, or feeling like, or that I created this. I should be more clear. I created this character when I was a kid, and now for some reason this is exactly the character that I created as a kid, with his strengths and his weaknesses and everything else. And it's like, I don't remember like, him being like, the boy who cried wolf about that when I read this like 23 years ago. I guess it's understandable.
Over on Earth with Kyle in his apartment doing his job, I love that we're choosing to display the reality that sometimes comic book artists are going to get assigned projects that they're not necessarily passionate about, but hey, a job's a job and you still have a deadline to meet. Yes. So I like that that's being portrayed here. And of course, I do like, we talk about it all the time when we talk about Kyle Rayner era stuff. I like that we're seeing here this moment between John and Kyle, because I would hope that the two know each other better than this is to be the first time John has heard of her. But again, it's been a while since I've read all of the Kyle Rayner era at a clip, so I can't really fault John for something that I don't 100% know very well myself here in terms of their personal history. But I do like, you mentioned the Power of Ion. I like the hints here of the era that we're getting in, and this is just not necessarily even there are visual cues which place this in a very specific timeline in the history of Green Lantern. The fact that John and Kyle don't know each other very well, if the art style alone didn't tip you off, the fact that John is in a wheelchair, and before we even get to the idea that Oblivion could be a creation of him, I think it's interesting to me that Kyle is creating this construct for John to have his own artist table or whatever, because part of me was thinking while I was reading this is like, you have to concentrate to create a construct. It's like he's just like he's so focused on his own art and everything. It's like I can't even imagine keeping a part of my mind just laser focused on creating this construct while I'm doing art. And it seems like he's providing no effort at all to maintain this construct for John. It's a small notice, but I did notice it.
Yeah, it definitely was a nice touch.
100%. And I do like that they get cut off, but like much like the moments you would see in Radu's or the conversations between Alan and Kyle that would happen that were not hero related. It was always good to see those moments, those just life moments with Kyle, and this is another one of those.
When we get those visits and those moments in Kyle's regular life and his non-Green Lantern part of his persona, I thought that was always, like we've talked about before, that was something that was, it may not be unique in the sense that it's never happened, because obviously we get a lot of that like in Spider-Man books, and we certainly, but because it's Kyle and because of what we get to see, not just that we get to see things, but lifting the veil, which is why it worked so well, I think, also with Spider-Man, because we know Kyle kind of like Peter Parker, Green Lantern here. They're just seeing the everyday crap that people have to deal with in the mundane stuff, but we all have to do it. That's kind of seeing Kyle have to struggle with that, even with the positives that he has as a superhero. I think that always works.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the things I liked with I always like the Kyle Hal stuff. I always think that's effective, and I do like the fact that you can kind of, when Hal does what he does, which is, we know it can be annoying doing stuff like this because we criticized it with Lonar in the John Stewart book, being cryptic and kind of pointing you in these directions, but never just being able to come out and tell you exactly, well, this is what's going to happen, or this is what you have to worry about. I understand it with Hal a little bit more because it's such a complete contrast to what he was when he was Parallax, with Hal wanting to change everything and believing Hal could, everything could be fixed, everything could be erased or redone. And Hal is so afraid of repeating those mistakes that on some level that probably there are things he could do when it comes to, intervening, interjecting into things, and it would be perfectly acceptable. I think that's the driving force. It's like why he's trying to be so incredibly cryptic. It's like I want to steer you in the right direction, but yet I don't feel comfortable either stepping in to do something myself or telling you exactly what this is, because I could be changing things that are things are meant to play out the way they're meant to play out.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I just, I honestly forgot that Hal Specter shows up in this. I know there were only a few times between him becoming Specter after Final Night and him getting his own series that he showed up here and there. Was he still making, because I feel like there was this period where he was making appearances as the Spectre after, I always get the events mixed up. Is it Day of Judgment?
I think it was Judgment Day. I always get it confused too.
Yeah. Anyways, once he's the Spectre at the end of that, and then him getting his own series, I feel like we didn't see him make these cameos as often once he had his own series, or did we still get him quite a bit during that?
There were some, there weren't as many. I think some of these, it was Day of Judgment.
Day of Judgment.
I probably swung the pendulum back. I used to think it was Judgment Day, and then I thought it was, oh, that's wrong, because it was Day of Judgment. It's Day of Judgment. That I think it used to happen more a little bit. I think it happened more when they were priming the pump.
That's what I was thinking. Like, yeah. We got a lot of these, like issue 119.
Yes.
Yeah, like those types of things. We would see him all the time in these little cameos, but then once he got his own series, it was like, okay, yeah, maybe occasionally if we need to use a Spectre, oh yeah, let's remember he's Hal or something. But they didn't make an effort to show him once he had his own series.
No, I think at the end of the day that you have, when you're looking at those appearances, you had, of course, JLA 35. And then you had issue 119, which was still December 1999. That's what the cover date was for that issue. And then I don't think you saw him again until they had the Legends of the DC Universe the Destroyer of Worlds 4-issue arc, which was that was really the, if you will, the pilot essentially of telling you, to let you know what his Spectre series was going to be. So I don't think there was as much of that after his series started, but as we know, he did play a role in Green Lantern because he did keep showing up, and especially once they kind of fixed that little part of his penance, because he even mentions in this book that basically he hasn't earned the right to to use some of the power yet of the Spectre, which was one of the things the two big burdens that he had, that nobody would know who he was, and he had to basically incrementally earn the right to really use the full power of the Spectre. And he kind of references both of those in this book. Once those things got pushed aside, and Kyle and Hal, Kyle would know that it was Hal. Hal would show up fairly often to help Kyle. So yeah,
for sure. It was cool to see him here. We get the atypical. We get two things here pretty quickly. We get Kyle's doubt in himself, which is a recurring theme with Kyle. I actually, you know what? I still need to reread the Kyle Rayner run, because I feel like I harp on it a little bit for Kyle so often being woe is me for so long and not living up to or owning who he is as a hero, and that he's enough to get the job done. He's always full of so much self-doubt for so long that it kind of annoys me. And because Kyle gets these moments where he gets to not only have his own series, but also has these little he's got this book. He's got what was the 3-issue thing with Alan and Jade?
Oh God, I know what you mean, but
he always has these little mini series that pop up throughout his run, like the New Core and stuff like that. He had these little random mini series that kept popping up throughout his run here and there, and it was always a theme like, okay, we're not in the main Green Lantern title, so we have to, if anybody's picking this up for the first time, we have to define who Kyle Rayner is for the new readers. And they keep circling back to the whole, he's a guy who doesn't feel worthy of this trust that the Guardians have placed in him. He thinks he was chosen by accident. This whole, not self-assured individual type thing that they keep circling back to. And it gets annoying, especially when you try and read these things at a clip, or you're like us and go back and review them. And you go, oh man, I remember the last time we covered something Kyle Rayner, we had to deal with this shit then too. So I wonder if it's maybe not as bad as I'm thinking of it, but they establish he's not confident in his abilities as a hero, and as a result, not in spite of this, but as a result, him and his demeanor is such that he is almost annoying to the League, like somebody they have to corral and rein in. So that's interesting too. Because I don't necessarily, I remember it being a part of us seeing his interactions with the League early on after he got his ring, but it's interesting that we're finally reading the part where that was, without spoiling too much of what's to come for the future people who are going to be covering the rest of the story, that this is the story where that's sort of resolved. His faith in himself and or let's say this is one of the times he resolves the faith in himself, and maybe the main time the story resolves his faith with the League. I don't know. I'm kind of stumbling my way through.
I know what you mean.
Describing that.
He earns a spot more, you mean?
Yeah.
And everyone, kind of like that Fear Itself graphic novel too, with Alan and Hal and all facing the same villains, and Kyle's the one who ultimately figures it out. Right,
for sure. We'll talk about the firestorm of it all, I guess, because we're going to be talking about our own issues. I do like that Batman doesn't want anything to do with any of this. They write it off as like he doesn't know what's going on. He's just doing his thing over in Gotham. And they try to be like, or he does know. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know that he knows. There's a couple of quote unquote explanations in this comic that, or in the, not just this issue, but this whole story that just sort of happened as a matter of convenience. And the Batman one is the most obvious of those, or the first of the obvious of those for me.
Yeah, we get a lot of this with Kyle. we see a lot of this with Kyle in Batman, and this is why it always made me want to bang my head against the wall when they gave us the garbage during the Green Lanterns run, when Simon was the only Green Lantern that Batman can trust, because everybody seems to be the only Green Lantern Batman can trust other than Hal, until you get to the next one, or it's convenient to decided, he didn't really trust that one, but he really trusts this one. That it's the same kind of thing. It's like, we see that during the Emerald Knight storyline about, how Kyle gets all pissed because they welcome the time lost Hal Jordan into the Justice League immediately. And it's like, and Batman's like, well, we're trying to keep an eye on him, number one. And number two, that's the main reason right there. And it has nothing to do with our faith in you. You're our Green Lantern. So you should stop feeling sorry for yourself and man up. So there's an element of that too, that, Batman being Batman, that Batman figures almost everything out. And if he's being a dick to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't like you. It means that he trusts you, even though he still would be a dick to you if he didn't like you too. So how do you know?
Yeah, that's always bugged me a little bit. I don't know what sits wrong with me about it, but it's not like it's uncharacteristic for Batman.
No, not at all.
But it does irritate me sometimes, hearing about it quite as often. I don't know what set off the whole Lanterns versus Batman thing, but it doesn't get any easier every time we see it, because there's some people who make it work, and they play with the idea maybe of the Batman likes to operate out of the dark, and lanterns, they quite literally just shine brightly wherever they go, which I think was pointed out in Rebirth.
Yes.
The way John accused Batman in Rebirth never, didn't sit right with me, but at least it kind of made sense. And the closest anyone ever really came to at least trying to explain why it happened. But
the part about the fear made sense. The part that one of the things that, even though we know he was arguably being influenced by Parallax during this moment, but John's point was still valid, that Batman basically lives off of fear and instilling fear in people, and the fact and what is Batman if you're not afraid of him? So that implying that that's one of the reasons that he has issues with Hal, because Hal was and is not afraid of him.
Yeah, no, 100%. Anything else we wanted to talk about? I know we didn't want to make this thing too long, but
right.
Anything else about this first issue we wanted to touch on before we move over to Firestorm?
Some of this your issue you'll touch upon some of it, but the stuff with, you talked about how the League may find Kyle annoying. I mean, man, Ray Palmer was really annoying in this issue. I mean, I understand he has a right to be pissed at Ronnie for just kind of being a Hal and just jumping in without thinking and doing stupid shit. But it's like he just keeps like rubbing his nose in the poop, like over and over and over and over again throughout the issue. And it's like, hey, you're the junior varsity, so you sit there, and so I mean, again, I get it, but it's also like you are beating it to death a lot in a relatively short number of pages.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
All right, cool. You ready to roll into the one shot?
Yes, Green Lantern Firestorm, Missing Pieces, written by Jay Faber, penciled by Ron Randall, inked by Dan Davis, lettered by Sean Honott, colored by Tom McCraw, separated by Digital Chameleon. Frank Barrios is the assistant editor, and Matt Idelson is our editor. We have Ronnie giving a recap of his origins to the Manhunter robot Green Lantern on their way to hunt down this tool that they spoke of. What did you say it was called? I already forgot.
Your Mega Option.
The Mega Option, that is correct. So, and this is speaking to the plot of convenience that I spoke of with Batman a minute ago. Batman just being unavailable for all of this. They're supposed to find this all-powerful tool or something that may not exist in the first place. And they decide, of all the universe, and having no leads on this tool whatsoever, that as they fly past the planet, Ronnie goes, let's check out this planet out of a gut feeling. That's the entire writer's plot of convenience here to get them down on the surface of this planet. Ronnie flies past the planet and goes, I have a gut feeling. Anyways, the planet they stumble upon has a lot of damage and destruction. As they touch down on the planet, they are immediately fired upon by this ship. Ronnie tries to transmute, and he wanted to gum up the works of these guns with bubble gum, but he instead made bubbles. The guns fire upon them again. Green Lantern suggests, and by Green Lantern, guys, I'm referring from now on, anytime I see Green Lantern right now, to this robot. Green Lantern suggests to try something more simple and suggests lead. He turns them to lead, but they are immediately transported then inside of the ship, where they face down a bunch of aliens. The captain is requesting their presence. The captain says, sorry, there was a bit of a misunderstanding. You bear a resemblance to this fire god that showed up on our planet and started wreaking havoc with everything. We're looking for something called the Omega option. We don't have time. The entire universe is at stake. Well, as a matter of fact, we have the Mega option, and we'll give it to you if you help us defeat this fire god. Green Lantern immediately offers his assistance, though Firestorm is initially, obviously, very hesitant. So he goes off to find the fire god, and they're trying to figure out where one would be hiding, but it's most obvious the sun, of course. And immediately some solar flares burst purposefully out of the sun and head towards that planet. Green Lantern goes to find the origin of these things and who fired off these solar flares. Ronnie shows up and somehow creates a giant fan, which blows back the solar flares. Okay. Meanwhile, immediately after they're deflected, Green Lantern comes crashing to the surface because he was thrown down by the fire god, whom Ronnie recognizes as the fire elemental, aka now Professor Stein. And he is a living fire elemental. He is merged with an elemental being. We could talk about that later, but they would spend all night. Anyways, they team up, and once Green Lantern realizes that this is the same fire, this is this is Professor Stein, whom Ronnie was speaking to Green Lantern earlier about his origins and who Stein was. He recognizes that there is a connection between those two. So instead of firing upon Professor Stein, the fire god, who's clearly outside of his mind, he fires at Ronnie, which he is correct. It jolts Professor Stein out of his, aggressive stance, and he starts attacking the Green Lantern instead to protect Ronnie. Ronnie recognizes this and says, "Hey, it's okay." And Professor Stein is back to his normal senses, still in his elemental fire form. He then goes before these aliens to apologize. They say, we should be who should be apologizing to you. We never had this weapon. We've never heard of it in the first place. Because of all the destruction that Professor Stein has caused in his elemental fire version, he knows of the problem and everything that after Ronnie and Green Lantern tell him what has happened, but he says his first duty and responsibility is to these people who he has, been destroying and hurting. So he wishes he could face this with them, but sorry. And this is when Green Lantern and Firestorm get a communique from Kyle that Oblivion is on Oa.
Woohoo!
Yes, sir. Who?
And you chose this one. We should point out you chose this one.
It's Firestorm. I've told people I have like top 5 characters in DC, and though the 5 to 10 or whatever rotates or changes its position in the list, Firestorm is in the list. So I was definitely not going to skip an opportunity to pass this one up. I maybe would have picked the Green Lantern one now, having read them all.
That's the one I would have picked, the one with Alex.
the Green Lantern one. But let's face it, of the ones that are going to be in this event, I think they're all pretty good issues in their own right for differing reasons. But in terms of the ones that are closer to an A as opposed to a B or a C, I would say, obviously the 2 bookends and then the Green Lantern one. And I think personal preference maybe boils it down in different ways for the others. But the Green Lantern one is pretty much an A. We couldn't take all the A's.
No, I know, but let's not make ourselves more noble than we were. That's not why you picked this issue.
No.
You would have picked it even if you knew it was a solid C. You still would have picked this one.
That is true. What do you think of it?
You're right. From a plot contrivance perspective, there's a lot of stuff to kind of like hold your nose on with this issue. The art was pretty good. I thought the art overall was more enjoyable in this issue, I thought, than a lot of the stuff in the Circle of Fire #1. There were some things I liked, like Oblivion himself looked pretty cool, and there were sometimes some of the characters looked cool, but in that issue. But I think overall the art in better. I kind of like the Manhunter Green Lantern. He has a pretty, considering he's a robot, he does have some personality to him, and that was kind of enjoyable. But there's a lot of it is hard when you read it just as a one shot which actually doesn't really move the plot forward much. That it's hard to overlook the contrivances of, like you said, he just happens to pick this planet to check out. Now, based on everything we know, if it was the robot Green Lantern that said, let's check this planet, then things would be okay. That would make a little bit more sense, actually. But the reality is that between that and it's Professor Stein, who they kind of were prepping us for unhappy divorce from Ronnie's perspective of him and Professor Stein. That was dealt with in issue #1 that I did. And then, which makes sense. The idea of, hey, I'm going to beat the hell out of this guy, and kind of like the Emperor Vader and Luke thing. It's like, if I beat the hell out of this guy enough, I might snap him out of it. I don't know. I think it was enjoyable, but again, because it doesn't really change, it doesn't really move you from point A to point B.
No.
It's not overly important. Like a lot of these one shots, as we see in bigger crossovers, it's like, well, they're not really that important. If you don't read it, it's not a big deal. If there was something that happened usually they'll reference it in some way in the actual proper series, and then you just deal with it. So it was okay.
Yeah, I think because basically the one shots are the missions that Kyle splits them off to at the end of the first issue, guys. So Power Girl and the Emerald Knight going off, since they're both strong, she's, Kryptonian or whatever she is at this point in her history. She does talk about in one of, it might be her own issue, Green Lantern Power Girl. She does talk about mention having been born in Atlantis 50,000 years ago or something like that. So I think we're very clearly at that stage of explanation of who she is. Either way, she's powerful. He's a Daxamite. Sending them to bust out the Justice League and face whatever's keeping the Justice League hostage, totally makes sense. Having Firestorm go with the scientist, the robot or whatever, who, because he needs his hand held, chemically, I guess. that makes sense. Adam does need to check on Ran, so I do like that he's sending someone to help address that. He's not minimizing the damage that has been done there, and having them be the last line of defense on Earth or whatever, that kind of makes sense. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't talk about their particular mission in that specific issue. So we'll talk about that in a future episode that we do. And then Green Lantern going to find Oblivion. That all makes sense. It's just specifically in terms of the ideas of the missions themselves, not necessarily the execution in each of the individual one shots. It's the Green Lantern Firestorm one that's the most far-fetched. Hey, I am working on this theory that Oblivion is a comic book character that I created when I was a kid come to life. I know it's hard to believe. Some of you still have a problem believing it, but I'm League member. That's the explanation we're going to go with and how we're going to operate here. Okay, running with that as the plan. Here are the missions. Oh, by the way, I also had this ultimate weapon, and just in case everything in the comic is true, I need to send you two knowing absolutely nothing about this weapon, its energy signature, where it might be. Just go off and try and find it in the universe, and see what you come up with. And they literally decide to stop on a random planet out of happenstance, and based on a gut feeling, and nobody, including the supposedly, at the very least, mega intelligent android life form, questions the idea that they just so happen to stop on the planet that of people that say they have this weapon. And then isn't there another gut feeling he goes with, just trying to find who this fire god is?
Kind of. That I think the GL tries to talk him out of it, saying that, basically like a belief in a deity is illogical or something like that. And he kind of, and you're, but he does, but Ronnie's just like, well, I happen to, I'm trying to find the exact quote. He says,
I've got a feeling that there is a fire god.
Yes. And that's when he says, yeah, belief in gods is not logical.
Now you could make the case, at least there, that Ronnie and Professor Stein were both impacted by the nuclear explosion that bonded the two of them into the being known as Firestorm, and then everything that happened that split the two up, and then Professor Stein became merged with this universal force fire elemental being and went off into space. And maybe he's sensing the two, but because you started off with such a random, nonsensical gut feeling, throwing another one at us is either brilliant, because if we didn't question the first one, why would we question the second one? Or just doubling down on the stupidity.
Go for broke.
I do like the art here too. What's interesting about the art is it doesn't line-wise remind me, maybe a little bit, remind me of Pat Broderick, but the coloring has a quality to it that Pat Broderick's books were often colored in. There's a not so crisp of a color. They're more soft. They fade into each other. Obviously, when we're talking things like reds and yellows, obviously those are very bright and bold and stuff like that. But there's almost a wash effect to them. They're blended very well. They're more smooth colors. And there's not as fine a line on some of the art here. I don't know. You just go back, guys, if you can pull up some examples online. Pull up some Pat Broderick art, some early Pat Broderick art on Firestorm. And even though it's not Firestorm, I'm also thinking of his run with Ragman in the early to mid 90s. Just look at the coloring that was done on that, and you'll probably see what I mean there. So it does remind me of Broderick, which makes me smile a little bit. And honestly, just the designs of Firestorm himself, and seeing, of course, the fire elemental reminds me of Firestorm or of Pat Broderick as well. What's also cool / ridiculous. Solar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 solar flares. Solar flares are headed directly to this planet, and Firestorm, who confused bubblegum with bubbles, creates not just something made of metal, but a working fan to blow back solar flares. If anything, that should have just been a construct creation fan. And at least maybe that would have made more sense. I don't know. But it's ridiculous either way.
Yeah, it's you just added, you kind of added to the list in this. And I also think this predates this character, but this elemental looks so much like Effigy too.
It does.
Yeah. But it predates Effigy, right? I think
should. Okay. So I have almost all, at least most of the first half. I'm pretty sure all of the first half and a portion of the second half of the Fury of Firestorm run in my back issue bins. And my collection starts missing issues around the Elemental era of Firestorm. I do have the first several issues of that. So I think I have, look, that's one, let's see here. Easily the first 50 issues without missing some, and even then beyond some, of a 100 something plus issue series. And it's been a while since I've gone back and read all of those, but I do love me some Firestorm. I'm trying to think of what I read of the other ones. Is this the most convenient of them? The others have their own problems for their own reasons, which we'll get into in the future. But in terms of the mission, yeah, it's the most asinine / out there assignment they could get with any hopes of success. But in terms of importance to the actual plot, leading from issue 1 to issue 2, the two bookends of this story arc, is this the least important, or would that be?
I can't judge
Adam?
yet. I can't judge yet because I have not gone back to reread all of them yet. I'm planning on doing it. I wanted to get this in, concentrate on these two issues first. Effigy, by the way, was June of '99, so I guess Effigy would have been created. I don't know if Effigy was created before the look of this elemental being Professor Stein was created, but obviously in this issue, this is after Effigy, which would make sense because we already know the Hal issue of the Spectre was 119, with 119, so it makes sense that Effigy came first. But I don't know if, I mean, it's ultimately ironic either way because you do have the mission in theory that they're going on could have been the one that could have been the most important thing, the key to beating Oblivion, but it turned out to be basically a red herring. On the surface, you would have thought it was going to be more important.
Yeah. By the way, the Elemental was 89. Yep.
Oh, okay. The same look? Same look?
Same look.
Okay, cool.
Yep. No, I enjoyed this. This is definitely a good start. The other podcasts are going to be covering the different factions of this. Do you have the list of who's covering what specifically?
I probably can. I believe.
Okay, here we go. Sorry.
You got it.
Yep. So Myron and Phil over at the podcast of Oa are going to be covering the Green Lantern and Adam Strange and the Green Lantern and Power Girls issues. Adam and Donnie over at Emerald Echo on the Multiverse Musings podcast network will be covering the Green Lantern Adam and the Green Lantern one shot as well. And then Mosaic Comics, which is our friend Dan Kurtzky over on his YouTube channel, he will be covering Circle of Fire issue 2 and then the Impulse quote unquote epilogue at the end to wrap this all up. Now, we don't have very specific release dates for these individual episodes because obviously it's based on the time and production of them, and they have the entire month to do it. So sometime between now and the last week or so of the month, the two episodes, one from Emerald Echo and one from Podcast of Oa, will be up. And then within the last week of the month of June, head on over to Mosaic Comics and wrap up the story.
Should be fun. We're hoping anyway.
Should be fun. And then obviously listen to future episodes of this show where we're going to give everybody a chance to cover their stuff. And then obviously we want to talk a little bit our own thoughts about how this story ended up playing out.
Absolutely.
All right. So just wanted to let everybody know, just while I was thinking about it, Podcast of Oa is over on various podcasting platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so on and so forth. Both Mosaic Comics and the Multiverse Musings Network are over on YouTube. So if you want to listen to / find those episodes from Donnie and Adam specifically, I know a lot of our listeners are already familiar with Dan and Mosaic Comics and where to find him on YouTube. But if you guys want to listen to Donnie and Adam's coverage over on Emerald Echo, you're going to not search Emerald Echo, search the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. That'll bring you to their channel page over on YouTube, and you'll be able to see which, clearly based on album art or thumbnail art, which ones are the Green Lantern ones. They're also referred to as Emerald Echo, and it should be an episode released sometime in June.
Or also GLJune label of fizzle out immediately.
All right. If people want to find us, how do they do so?
LanternCast.com. The email is LanternCast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Please leave us a positive review on all platforms you listen to us on. LanternCast Vids is our YouTube channel. Last but not least, if you'd like to leave us a text or a voicemail, 708-LANTERN. 708-LANTERN, and let us know what you think.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.